Hello, I'm Tom. I'm a partner at a firm called Stephen Scown. We're based in Cornwall, Devon, and Somerset. Yay, everyone's favourite Sept. I am head of the Intellectual Property Data Protection and Technology team. It's a bit of a mouthful, especially when you put it next to my name, which is Tom Chartres-Moore. So I just go by Tom. Oh, it's falling off. I'm also the firm's strategic member for organisational effectiveness and efficiency in business, which I truncate to efficiency. They don't like that because they're lawyers, they like more words. So the slides I was going to show you were all really excellent information about AI, and I think the task of my final hour presentation was to summarise some of the concerns that you should have around AI, why it's really dangerous, why you shouldn't use it, and you should immediately delete all social media from your phones and go and live in a hovel. So where do we start? Well, we have to start with the beginning. And the beginning of AI, reference, I think you, Scott, said AI is really old, isn't it? And it is really old. There are books written in the 1920s about mathematical computation which would eventually exceed the capability of a single human brain. But if we go back even further than that, we need to look at where law starts. Has anybody here done constitutional law of the English system as a study at undergrad or overgrad? Did you? Oh, obviously you did, James. You work for me. You did, okay. So you know about Oliver Cromwell. Okay, Charles I, bit of a bastard. I promise you, by the way, this will eventually get back to AI. Charles I, bit of a bastard. Oliver Cromwell, also a bastard, but a different type of bastard who didn't like Charles I. Oliver Cromwell said to Charles I, you're the king and you're just doing whatever you want. Probably not in that accent. And Charles I said, but I'm the king and I'll do whatever I wish. And then they had a big war. I'm teaching you history. You should all know about the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. And Cromwell chopped his head off. That's kind of like, spoiler, Charles I died. And Oliver Cromwell became the Lord Protectorate for the three kingdoms, United Kingdoms of Scotland, Wales and England, excluding Cornwall. Anyway, at that time, Oliver Cromwell then had to have a thing called a parliament, which was already an idea under Charles I and going back to that, Elizabeth I, but really came into its own with Oliver because he was allowed to pass laws. However, that didn't last long. Does anyone know what happened to Oliver Cromwell? Sorry?
He also got his head chopped off.
He didn't get his head chopped off, he died. And then his son got given the job, which sounds a bit like being king, and then he got his head chopped off. So when his head got chopped off, Charles II came back from France, lovely holiday chaps, don't mind if I do, came back into the country, set back up as king, but had to keep Parliament, at which point you then have a really tricky situation where you're like, well, shit, who sets the laws around here? Is it the king or Parliament? And thus the trilogy was perfected and the judiciary came into play. And so in our country, we have judges who interpret the law and make decisions. We all with me so far? You also have the king, who doesn't really do anything anymore. He's got roll of black rod, taps a box, lovely hat, moves on, fat hands. You also have the statutory implementations of government. And all of these things play together to give you our legislative system. It's fantastically complex, it's really ingrained in history, and it doesn't really work for things like AI. And this is why. If I'm the government, something has to happen at a massive level for me to have any care in the world. There has to be, and it's horrific. Usually it's absolutely horrific. There has to be deaths in a burning tower block. There have to be people committing suicide because of the reports about education systems. There has to be significant hardship across a society for me as the government to turn around and go, probably need to legislate for that. There have to be things like safety features. There has to be serious levels of legislation about what you can and can't do. Things like speed limits, things like seatbelts, things like protection of the internet so that you can't access pornography and all the other bad things that are out there. That's what the government's job is. And then the judge's job is to go, well, this isn't happening quick enough. So on a day-to-day basis, when stuff happens and it comes in through the courts, I'm going to have to make a decision based on two things: how I feel and the fish I ate last night, which is giving me a bit of jip, and precedent. Anybody familiar with the concept of precedent? Legal precedent. Well, obviously you can nod because you did the study, and James isn't nodding, which is worrying because he works for me. But precedent is the idea that anything that you're dealing with in law has happened before. Yeah, we all happy with that? And when the pandemic struck, the Daily Mail, and actually everybody went, oh my God, it's unprecedented. Which is not true, because the Spanish flu in 1904 was a very good precedent for the situation where you had to restrict trade and free movement of people. And for example, when Brexit happened, everyone, oh my God, it's unprecedented. But actually the dissolution of Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland in 1897 was a very similar situation where we're allowed to identify what we do about things like IP. So nothing's ever entirely unprecedented. And AI, I think they've all left now, because obviously I'm talking, but the presenters earlier were talking about Gartner. Gartner did a report and said AI is like the steam engine. It's the fourth industrial revolution. That's exactly true. It is. In fact, Gartner were in the room in 2017 when I said AI is like the spinning jenny, and the bastards nicked it and made it better. I'll sue them later. The point is, it is an industrial revolution of sorts. It is, to some extent, from a societal point of view, unprecedented. But from a legal perspective, it is not unprecedented at all. The idea that we have some form of revolution on our hands is not unprecedented. The fact that we might have less hardship, higher workforce skill, and an ability to enjoy ourselves for longer during a working day because we're not working as hard is not unprecedented. That has been seen before. But what we don't know, because we are at the cusp of that unprecedented period, is which way this goes. So, take for example, the bicycle. The bicycle was invented and saved millions of people from certain STDs because it allowed you to travel to a village further away than your sister or cousin and procreate with a different number of people. The bicycle saved humanity. It is not highly regulated. You can ride a bike where you like. You should wear a helmet, but you don't have to by law. You can't ride it faster than 25 miles an hour if it's on a cycle path, and you can't ride it faster than 60 miles an hour unassisted if it's an electrically assisted bicycle. But other than that, a bike's a bike. Penny farthing if you want to. You'd have to be an idiot or a Radio 2 host, but you can. Go to the other end of that spectrum and look at the managed workforce. Look at the spinning jenny or the steam engine or the motor vehicle. All things which are equally inventive steps which have revolutionized the course of human history. But at the time when they were invented, people thought, shit, this is dangerous. And legislation steps in and judges start making decisions. And you have things like speed limits and seat belts and driving on the left or the right, depending on where you're from. All of these things are legislative decisions that take place at the cusp and thereafter from that revolution. And we are in that sweet spot right now. So what am I telling you? AI has no statutory definition in England. There is one in Europe, there is none in England. We have stuff which is close, but not quite. So we have something called automated decision making, ADM, that's in the GDPR. If anybody likes acronyms, I can reel off a load right now, but I won't. Which is kind of close because it's about making decisions in respect to personal data, which doesn't have a human involvement. So that's a little bit AI-ish, but it's not incomplete. And at the same time, you have some old bits of law, like really old bits of law, some of it undocumented insofar as it's just like tortious claims, or it might be common law, or it might be in equity, and all of that has to be applied. But you have to see the cases, to see the application of the law, to see the outcome, and we have not got there yet. We have seen companies like the Guardian newspaper suing OpenAI for scraping of their articles for production of output on ChatGPT. So they're very upset, understandably so in some respects, because you're paying to read The Guardian, and all of a sudden you don't have to pay to read The Guardian, or journalistic input is being produced as journalistic output by a third party without consent, which is copyright infringement. That's their claim. But we haven't seen the outcome of that yet. And even if we do see the outcome, there's likely to be appeals. There's likely to be further cases. There's likely to be the structure and format of law that falls in and around that. And not until there is a significant volume of concern are we going to see significant volume of legislation. So this leaves us in a bit of a weird place. Some would say a very advantageous place. There is no statutory definition for AI. There are some laws which currently concern AI but are not about AI. There's some thought about what legislation for AI would look like, but it's undecided. So we live in a sort of AI Wild West, where you can do pretty much whatever you want. There are some good ideas not to do stuff with AI, like don't use it to stalk people, don't put personal data in it if it's not your own, don't put commercially sensitive and confidential information in there, because that would be quite silly. But there are also, there's no one telling you not to. There's no hard and fast rule where someone's going to come down on a ton of brick statutory instrument and go, nope, actually law says you can't do that. So it's a fun time. It's a good time. But the sun will set on this period, so we have to make the most of it. And we're also in the formative period. So if you think about something, I don't know if that's right or wrong. Well, they referenced earlier, and law and ethics often get grouped together in these presentations when people talk about it. And I have to tell you, law and ethics is not normally grouped together. But you can make the ethical choice rather than the legal choice. And that at the moment has to be your guiding star, because the law ain't going to do it for you. So hopefully that's the right AI. Otherwise, I can do artificial insemination. I look like I've dressed for the farm, so happy to do that. Yeah, that's where we're at. Not a huge amount to report at the moment, but you all now know about the history of AI and legislative system of the UK. So thank you very much.